Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, I should say, and welcome to the Digital Craft Festival. I'm really delighted today to introduce you to Keith Brymer Jones, designer, potter, and judge of the Great Pottery Soda. Welcome to the Digital Craft Festival, Keith.
Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, hi.
Great to see you again. And we've chatted before. And I am delighted to hear that you are actually Welsh. I mean, I know I'm a bit of a bore when it comes to things like that. But can you tell me a little bit about your early life then?
Well, so my mother was from Swansea and my father was from Cardiff. They met in London, actually, funnily enough. They were part of the London Welsh fraternity because both their families came down to London just before the war. On my father's side, they came down with a dairy, as you did.
Yeah.
They walked the cows down and they set up in East London. And they had a dairy for a while just before the war. But they met through the London Welsh Association in London. And I was born in Barnet, North London, but I very much sort of identify with my Welsh heritage and background. And for since the age of 0 to about 22, we just went to Wales every single year for holiday. That was it, no questions asked. So I know Wales really, really well.
So did I actually.
Yeah. No, and it was great. It was really lovely. So yeah, I am Jones the Potter, really.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I forgot that they didn't meet. They weren't meeting in Wales. They actually moved to London and met, because there's always a big community of Welsh people that join through the sort of London Welsh societies and things. That's still going strong now, I think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's still going. Yeah, and they used to go to the Charing Cross Chapel, which was back in the day the old Limelight Club. It's off Shaftesbury Avenue, and so yeah, they used to meet up there and get a talking to by the minister. Welsh Methodist.
That's a very chapel, is it?
Yeah. Pretty hardcore, and then spend the rest of the day in Soho in all the milk bars back in the 50s, way back when. So that's how they kind of met, and the rest is history, as they say. Yeah.
So you were brought up in London.
Yeah, born and bred in London, and then I moved out of London in around about 2000. Moved to Whitstable. I still had the studio up in Highgate, North London, so I used to commute for about 2 or 3 years, as and when I was looking for the right sort of studio in where I live, Whitstable. And fortunately, something came up, and then I moved the whole studio from Highgate, where I'd been for a good 17, 18 years. I moved it all to Whitstable. Yeah.
So when you started out, when did you first started out in clay? Then when did that come into your life?
Oh God, the age of 11 at school. Yeah. Secondary school. Yeah, as I say, I mean, I've told this story many times, but I was given a lump of clay. We all walked into the art room one day, first year of secondary school. Mr. Mortman, you always remember an inspiring teacher. He gave us all a lump of clay and said, "See what you can do with that." And fortunately for me, I took to it really easily. Completely connected with the material itself straight away, and made something remotely half decent, which I was commended for, which basically was the first time any teacher had ever given me any kind of praise whatsoever at school. So I thought, I'll stick with this, and I literally was obsessed. I was in there in the lunch hour, I was there after school, all the time. In fact, back in the day, I mean, this is the 80s, back in the day, the art teacher used to get me to fix the kilns. So when I was about the age of 13, I was changing elements on kilns. It was just, health and safety nightmare, as you can imagine. But yeah, back in the day, fix the kiln key. So I do all that.
It's good to know the department had kilns, and they were making and using them, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we were lucky at school. I mean, they weren't being used that much, but we had all the equipment. We had pug mills, we had wheels, kilns, and I always tell the famous line. Mr. Mortman used to stay in there at lunch in the lunch hour, and I used to work in there. And every now and again he'd stand up and say, "Right, I'm just going to go off for lunch now, Keith. Now, when you fix that kiln, make sure you switch it off before you change the elements. It's like, I'm a 13-year-old, and that's what I used to do. So, and I used to remember to switch the kiln off. Yeah,
Wait, so many good and bad lessons learned there, isn't there, really?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So did you start throwing pots at school then?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So started throwing pots at school, and then did O and A level, pottery. I think I got a B in my A level. Yeah. And but anyway, I was then going to go to Harrow or Camberwell to carry on with. Back in the day, in the 80s, they had tremendously brilliant pottery courses. I mean, Mick Casson was at Harrow at the time, and so I was going to do that, but I was really disillusioned with further education. I really didn't want to do that. So yeah, I put an advert in the Ceramic Review. Funnily enough, its 50th anniversary this year. Put an advert in there as a clay boy, shoveling clay, and fortunately got a job in a pottery just outside Watford, near Harefield, and worked there for about 8 or 9 years. Became head of production there, and then started up my own pottery in Highgate. Yeah.
Well, I mean, amazing. I mean, I can't imagine that happening now, that you could put an advert in Ceramic Review and get this, in that way. Do you think, I would imagine that's completely, it wouldn't happen now.
No, I mean, it was amazing, really. And, as they say, ignorance is bliss. I mean, I was just totally innocent and ignorant to the wider world. And yeah, just thought, well, I'll put an advert in and see what happens. And yeah, lo and behold, this dodgy geezer phoned me up from Harefield. He didn't sound like a potter. Well, I don't know what potters sound like really, but no, he phoned me up. He sounded more like a bank robber, and asked me to come in on a Monday morning for an interview, which I duly did. This pottery was right by a canal, and my whole job interview consisted of me talking to a car, because he literally stayed under the car. He was fixing this car. He stayed under the car fixing this engine for the whole duration of the interview, and the interview lasted for about 20 minutes, with the culmination of the final question: can you shovel clay? You must do, because you're Welsh. And I said, yeah, I think I can do that. He said, right, start on Friday. And so I went back there on Friday and formally met him then. I actually got to see his face. Yeah.
So I mean, how did that, was it, were you doing everything? What's the sort of things are you doing?
No, so I certainly wasn't doing everything. No, I remember the first day, a few expletives were said to me, directed at me. But my first lesson was how to make a cup of tea. He said, you've probably made tea before, but this is how we do it here. If you don't make it like this, you'll be in the canal. And that threat of being in the canal sort of carried on throughout a fair few years at Harefield, I must say. So no, I certainly wasn't allowed to go anywhere near the wheels at first. I wasn't allowed to make anything, not for orders anyway. And so I literally shoveled clay, because we used to make our own clay body, a white stoneware clay body, and we used to sell it to funnily enough, ironically, to Harrow and Camberwell, and we used to sell this clay. And so I used to shovel clay. I used to work the filter presses to make the clay, and it was really, really kind of industrial work. It was like working on a building site. And we used to, every two weeks, we used to get 10 tons of shredded raw clay delivered in a massive lorry. Used to dump it on the ground, and I used to have to shovel it into a clay hop. And that happened every 2 weeks. And I mean, literally, I was as skinny as anything when I first started. And after a couple of years working at Harefield, I looked like a bricklayer, basically. Yeah, just 5 Mars bars a day and shoveling clay every 2 weeks. And yeah, and now I look like a bloody bouncer, but never mind.
Well, give you strength, I tell you, because it's so you're given all the hard jobs to do by the sounds of it, and then when did they actually let you loose on the wheels then?
So I remember talking to Alan, because obviously I was really young, enthusiastic 18-year-old, Sig's apprenticeship at pottery. That was the line I put in the ceramic review. But yeah, I was young, enthusiastic, incredibly innocent, incredibly naive. And I remember turning to Alan, one of the bosses. There was Alan and Robert there, and just saying, when can I start making, some of the orders, and he literally turned around. He said, well, I'll give it about 5 or 6 years. And I was in shock. And so, from very early on, I was forced to ball up 100 balls of clay at £1 each, and I had to throw them all before I was allowed to leave to go home every single day. And I must have done that for about 2 or 3 years. And after about 3 years, they deemed me good enough to be able to throw on the wheel. And quite frankly, I mean, obviously in hindsight now, looking back on that, it was incredible. It was brilliant. And
It's been hard at the time, though. It must have been really quite difficult.
It was really tough. And I must admit, there were certain days I'd go into the studio, into the pottery, and think, bloody hell, what am I doing this for? I mean, it was like a Hovis advert. It really was. Every day. They were long days. I used because of where I lived in Finchley, North London, and I had to get to Watford. There was no way of getting across, so I had to go into town and out, and it used to take me about 2.5, 3 hours to get to work. So I'd get up at 5, I'd be at the bus, catching the 13 bus to Baker Street by about 5:30, and then out again from Marylebone Station overground to Rickmansworth. I'd then walk along the canal 2 miles and arrive around about 8 o'clock, about 8:30 every morning. And
every day.
And then for about 3 or 4 years I did that, until, funnily enough, I learned to drive, and I came in one day, and I'll start crying now. and Robert and Alan had bought me a car. He said, "Oh, yeah, I see you passed your test. Yeah, well done. Here's a car." And then from then on, it used to take me about half an hour to get to work. It was brilliant.
Well, I would imagine that the fact that they'd nearly worked you to the bone, I think it's probably why they were fair play to them that they actually got you a car.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough work, and I think the fact that the fact that we used to make our own clay, and I literally learned from the ground up, quite literally from the ground up. In fact, underneath the ground up, was just such an amazing learning experience, and an incredible insight into the material itself, and I often go on about it, but if you're doing any kind of craft, there's a real element of discipline within that craft to learn it, to really, really appreciate what you're supposed to be doing with that given material. And for me, it was a fantastic learning curve, and a brilliant place to be. So it was great.
Did you go? Well, I mean, to say that you learnt your trade, on the job is an understatement of the year, isn't it? But you go there from then to you setting your own place up then? Did you go?
So I worked at Harefield for about, as I say, 8 or 9 years. And then we were making, it was a brilliant place really, Harefield. We had a massive oil-fired kiln, which was a good 400 cubic feet kiln, huge thing. We had electric kilns for all the biscuitware that we would fire. We had a salt glaze kiln outside, kind of illegal in the built-up area, but there you go, hey ho. And that was a funny
normally
story.
Stick those in Wales, don't they? The salt.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, Wally Keeler, he uses salt glaze, but it was incredible because some days we'd be firing this salt glaze kiln out in the yard, and all of a sudden the wind would change, and the gas from the kiln would come towards the workshop, and we'd have to literally run out of the workshop because it was like tear gas. It was like mustard gas. And I remember Alan one day had parked his van right next to the kiln. And we came back one day and all the glass had been etched. A brand new van and all the glass had been etched from the salt kiln. Well, so, you know, things like that used to happen all the time. Absolutely mad. But what I'm trying to say was that because of all these different processes and all these different types of making, it was just a wonderful place to work. But they came up with this idea of doing tartanware. We started doing making tartanware for Jasper Conrad, funnily enough. Back in the 80s, he was coming up with a fashion range of doing tartan buttons for his clothing. Anyway, we made all these tartan buttons, and it sort of mushroomed from there, and we started doing tartanware, and then they moved to Scotland in the early 90s. They moved up to Scotland, and I didn't really want to go to Scotland at the time, so I set up my own studio in Highgate in North London. Yeah.
So is that because, I mean, obviously the groundwork that was done in those years, you know, that's the kind of training that probably is hard to come by now. In terms of that kind of level of apprenticeship that you're on, that's intense, really, where you're not even allowed to touch certain things, you know, go through those processes, so you get an absolute master of every single part of it.
And I'd regularly ball up and prepare clay for Alan, who was predominantly the fastest thrower, Alan Pett, and I'd ball up like 1,000 balls of clay because he could throw about 1,000 pieces in a day, and sometimes I would bring this clay to him by the side of his wheel on this huge trolley, and he'd literally just touch it with his hands. And he'd go, no, it's too hard, send it back. And I'd have to do it all again. And it was like, it was a school of hard knocks, but you certainly learnt. And I learnt, you know, the value and the importance of getting the material right before you start using it. And it was that connection and that affinity on a daily basis of this material that we were using. Really truly understanding what it was all about, and it was fantastic. But it was school of hard knocks.
Yeah,
but it was good. It was good.
Serious business. But before we carry on, I just want to say to the audience that if you want to ask Keith a question in the chat, please feel free to put things in the chat. We'll if they come up naturally, we'll ask the questions, or we might ask a few towards the end. Okay, so feel free to ask Keith anything that you want. But so in terms of developing your own work. Obviously, I know you for doing the range with the words on. You know, that's a massive range, a massively successful range of work that is still going, isn't it? I mean, it's how many years has that been doing well?
Well, we've been making the word range mass production now for about 10, 11 years. We sell to about 40 countries around the world. So I have the studio in Whitstable. And then I have another one in China. We have various factories that we work with in China. It basically, the province, the Guangdong province, which is southern China, the bottom, a place called Chaozhou, which is basically the Stoke-on-Trent of China. It's an amazing place. Yeah. And I teamed up with my business partner, as I say, about 10 or 11 years ago. And he had a few contacts in China, had no idea about ceramics or design or actually anything tasteful, to be perfectly honest with you. But so I hopped on a plane with him and we went to China, and it was so incredible that I was a bit apprehensive because I'm predominantly a craft potter, a studio potter. So delving into the world of industry and mass production was a new thing for me, and I thought I wouldn't recognize any of the processes or even understand or comprehend what they were doing. But it was quite amazing. The first factory I visited in China, it was like Stoke-on-Trent back in the 80s, to be perfectly honest. And it was wonderful, and a lot of the work was still done by hand. And the porcelain deposits, as you may know, in China are just second to none. Absolutely fantastic. So we started developing the word range in China. And as I say, yeah, we sell it all over the place now. Yeah.
So the prompt to start making it honestly on a scale that you needed it to be able to fulfill the demands. I mean, there must have been a point where that wasn't the case. So you started on your pottery then, literally making
Well, well, I mean, I was designing and making for. I mean, it's a really weird thing now because you don't think of it now, but sort of late 80s, early 90s, for me personally, I really saw a sea change in the retail industry, the retail market, and what was happening in home furnishings and ceramics being one of those things was that the retail industry was really treating home furnishings like the fashion industry. You'd have spring, summer, autumn, winter ranges, just for want of any other way of describing it, just because they could sell more stuff, I think, but to be perfectly honest. But because of that, I tapped into this kind of cycle of people like Habitat or Conran or Laura Ashley, Monsoon, all these big sort of major high street stores at the time, tapped into their sort of their design ethic and what they were doing, basically different ranges for different seasons. And because I could make, anything between 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 pieces at any one time, for them that were relatively small runs, but it meant that we could design and make for particular seasons. And that went on throughout the whole of the 90s, really, to the point where I was making 16,000 pieces per range for particular shops.
Yeah, and at that time you were still throwing them yourself then?
I used to hand throw everything, and I was hand throwing between 700 and 900 pieces a day. And at that point, I would, in my studio in Highgate, I'd have people sort of satelliting round the wheel that would be doing all the other sort of various jobs, like preparing the clay, packing the pots, unpacking the kiln or whatever. And I'd literally bark orders from my wheel. I'd sit on the wheel at 5:30 in the morning, and I wouldn't really leave the wheel until about 5 in the afternoon, or maybe sometimes 6 in the evening. And that's how it used to be. And it was grueling stuff, but Radio 4, cups of tea, it really gets you through it. And I kind of like that meditative state that you tend to get, not just with throwing, but hand building, or as in Sue's case, Sue Pryke's case, slip casting. You get into a meditative state and you really get into what you're doing. And it's quite a nice feeling. In fact, it's still the best part of my job now, getting on the wheel and making. Yeah, absolutely.
The work ethic is out of this world, really. In fairness to you, Keith, I think there's
I was an idiot. Yeah.
But it is that sort of, you touching on about how it makes you feel, and everything. Because we talk about, how making makes you feel, and I think a lot of makers, it is about the meditative process of the action of making that keeps them going.
And without sounding sort of too poetic, but it's that relationship that you as a maker has with the craft and the material itself. I absolutely love that. When I do judging, and Sue will agree to this, hopefully. But when you're judging, or when you're looking or observing a piece of work, if you can see and acknowledge that connectivity that person has with the material itself, and you can see that in their work, it's absolutely lovely. It's actually, for me, it's one of the best feelings that you can get, that connectivity and that acknowledgement that maker has really connected with the piece of work. I love it, absolutely love it.
We'll talk a little bit about the pottery throwdown in a bit, because I mean, everyone knows you. A lot of people know you now because of that as well, and you got your work, as a maker and now as a judge, but also you're quite involved with a campaigner really for craft and art education. And we've got a question, and you said you had something you were going to share with us, but it was a question from a potter, Gilly Russell. She's asked, you've touched on your dyslexia in the past. We haven't talked about dyslexia. I know you've mentioned your dyslexia a lot over the on the news, so it's not we're not launching you into it now, I don't think. So it's lovely that you found an opportunity for success at school. What are your thoughts on the lack of opportunities in schools these days?
Oh, it's bloody awful, to be perfectly honest. It's a disaster. Yeah, it's ridiculous. The fact that one half of your brain isn't exercised at school to any great sort of comprehension is just ridiculous. But hopefully there is hope on the horizon. And you know, I say that as a blanket statement. Obviously, that there is creative subjects at various schools to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the school and the importance that they put on that. And it's so vitally important for young people to engage with a cognitive experience. I was invited to join a panel a couple of months ago, the T panel, to come up with, and I get this is mind-blowing, to come up with a new qualification for art and craft in schools, and it's called the T-level qualification. It'll be the equivalent to 3 A-levels, and it'll cover ceramics, jewelry making, furniture design, and fashion. And this is going to be a 2-year course in schools. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if we get it all written down and approved by the Department of Education, of which that's who I've been invited by. It'll be approved and it'll be rolled out in March of next year. And it's a fantastic. And I remember when I was invited, and similar to this, a Zoom bloody chat, as we all do these days. The first thing I said was, God, I wish a qualification had been like this when I was at school. Because not only is it a great opportunity for kids to learn, but also you're not telling that child that they're useless at anything else other than academic subjects. They're being acknowledged for being not even different. They're being acknowledged for an interest in something that they have other than ticking boxes or chemistry, maths, or any of the other academic subjects. You know, there's a whole swathe of young people out there that aren't actually being catered for in our education system, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Because I know now, I mean, it's even more, well, at the moment, it's very difficult to even choose 3 creative subjects at A-level, even if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Even at GCSE, you know, it's certainly on a local level in Devon, you could choose one, but there was pretty much, and that included music and drama.
Yeah.
So you were to choose which one of them, you know, and usually you're interested in all of them if you're interested, if that's your interest.
And again, without sounding sort of too hippie nightmare universe and this, that, and the other, but I would strongly suggest that society as a whole these days is much harsher and is poorer and is definitely more constrained. And I think it's because our young people aren't getting that opportunity to really express themselves through what they can do with their hands. It's as simple as that. I know that sounds like a real sort of Buddhist thing to say, but it's true. So, you know, you look through the history of the world and you look at all the major societies that have been formed. What do you think of first? You think of their artwork, and you think of their artwork because it's a perfect way of communicating that particular society's message throughout the world. It's as simple as that. You know, a picture can say 1,000 words and all that malarkey, but it's absolutely true. And if we lose that sense of the importance of that creative language and that creative skill, what are we going to do? It's ridiculous.
No, I mean, I've noticed, you know, over the years as we're going along, you know, there's less makers coming into the system that are at the standard that I would want for the craft festival, for example. I mean, there were still loads, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
The makers that we have at the show are so, you know, as again, time served, as much as a lot of makers would have gone through higher education, granted, but it's just seeing that, you know, I do fear, I think there's going to be a real skills gap. You know, I know this is a phenomenal progress, you know. I don't think anyone in here can express how important and happy I feel about that, what you just said. But I know that there's going to be a few years, or maybe 5 or 6 years going forward, where there's going to be a real difficulty in where people are not coming through that process, you know, in the system to be and to see that is a fulfilling and, as you say, worthwhile way to live your life, you know.
And absolutely, and not putting too much of a holistic approach on it, but you know, whether you and the viewers here will hopefully appreciate this, but whether you go on from school, whether you go on to carry on making or carry on being creative, it opens the door in your head of so many other ways of approaching life, of approaching and observing the world and problem solving. I mean, let's face it, as craft people, that's what you do when you get up in the morning. You problem solve. And hopefully that problem solving reaches a sort of a goal where you've got something half decent at the end of it.
Yes.
And that's what it's really all about. And it gives a person so much more inner confidence to be able to think creatively and work with their hands. It's a no-brainer, really is.
Absolutely, and I think it'd be really important to see how the emphasis comes away from you know, what does this create for a career? You know, it's like, right, what you do that because you want to be that. You know, it's always so narrow thinking. You know, I think it's about being expressing your creativity. I did ceramics at A level and art, and I went on to a career in ceramics. But I'm not a maker. But if I hadn't done that, you know, as you say, it gives you an incredible opportunity to be able to think things through and think through ideas. But also, I can't stand it when people put a value on things in certain different ways. You know, like being a lawyer is more valuable than being a potter. You know, it's
Well, funnily, you've hit the nail on the head there, because one of the major discussions we're having at this T panel process is, you know, the powers that be, the Department of Education, love to tick a box. You know, now we all know art and craft is very subjective, and it's that grey area, but it's also that balance in an academic sort of qualification. It's that balancing act between getting that practical and subjective skills on one side, and the powers that be in their suits and ties wanting to tick a box. And it's marrying those two together. It can be done, and it's marrying those two together to make a really viable qualification. I mean, I just remember a funny story. I just remember when I left school at 18, and the careers officer, I don't know if you lot, we used to have a careers officer at school, and you were allotted a time to go and see them. And I remember sitting across the desk from my careers officer, and her telling me, she said, and what do you want to do with the rest of your life? You can either join the police, the gas board, or British Telecom. I remember they were my three options, because I was, you know, deemed as not brilliantly academically bright, and I said, well, actually, I want to be a potter. And she literally was sitting the other side of the desk, and she literally went, well, you're on your own there. I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. Yeah. And she was quite disgusted by the idea. So yeah, I was on my own, and lesson learned. So yeah, that was it.
I think there's a lesson learned for her as well, because it's like, you know, where's she now? You know, in terms.
Yeah.
I think I was probably told it was going to be a nurse. You know, you generally get the sort of gender specific roles, you know, and then
absolutely
that's your lot. That's your lot. Kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got a few questions here. What have we got here? I always feel I have so many returners, both to evening classes and to education. Is it never too late to find that passion for something you love in clay? No, of course not. It's never too late.
I'll tell you what.
Find your passion.
Watch the next series of The Throwdown, and there's a living example of it's never too late.
Well,
That's
Well,
all I'm saying. No, of course it's never too late. It's never too late because the minute you're born, you don't stop. You never stop learning. You know, you literally don't stop learning. And if you think you do, you're in trouble. Seriously. And
yeah.
life and craft and art is a metaphor for trial and error. That's what it is. And you never stop learning. And God forbid you ever think you do. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the pottery throwdown then. So I love it. I think it's a brilliant program. It does so many different things. For a lot of people, it's brought, I brought people who have never, who know a bit about pottery and ceramics, love it. Well, I certainly do. And people who don't know anything about, they're starting to understand about it and get excited about it and actually wanting to make. So
Yeah.
it's had a fantastic impact on the ceramic industry. So how did you get involved with it in the first place, Keith?
Well, that's the funny thing as well. That's the universe answering whatever call it was. Seriously, it at the initial stage, it literally had nothing to do with pottery. It had everything. It had everything to do with me wearing a dress, singing an Adele song, and doing a video. Seriously, it's bizarre. Life is bizarre. But back in the day, Make International with my business partner, we came up with this idea of doing these spoof videos, and in fact, the only reason why we did the Adele video is because my business partner, bit of a toff, and his aunt had a mansion in Norfolk, which looked very, very similar, in fact, uncanny, to the Adele video, Rolling in the Deep. It was the perfect set. In fact, it wasn't filmed there, the original Adele video, but it looked very, very similar. So he thought it would be a great idea to do a spoof of this Adele video because it had broken pottery in it. It's a very surreal video. She's sitting on a chair in a deserted mansion for no reason whatsoever. And so we trotted to this mansion in Norfolk and did this video. It kind of went a bit viral off the back of the Adele video, which was the most watched music video in the history of YouTube at the time. Something like 360 million hits or something.
Yeah.
At the time, we were working with this billionaire woman over in America, thinking about rolling out KBJ shops in all these shopping malls that she owned, about 100 shopping malls throughout America. Anyway, that didn't come off, but she was a lovely woman. And it was great. We had a great laugh. She just happened to know Rich McCarrow from the Love Productions team, and he was over. This is 7 years ago now.
Yeah.
He was over there selling the Bake Off to the American networks. He's over there on a foray. He has a breakfast meeting, whatever they do over there in America, with said woman, and says, I'm looking for the next sort of Bake Off. Really, I'm looking for a vehicle that I could, devise another format and another program. And she pipes up and says, well, you never guess, I'm working with this cross-dresser nutter potter and this toff bloke from England, and they've done this video. Go and have a look at it. He literally went back to the hotel room, watched the video on YouTube, and phoned me up from America and said, oi, do you want to be a judge on this new program I think I've put together about pottery? And I must admit, I thought pottery on telly, that's watching paint dry, surely. And he said, no, I think we could make it really exciting. And I'd been in a band back in the 80s, and I was a bit miffed with, showbiz and all that. It's all very cynical and very fickle. And I said, look, mate, I don't know whether I'll be interested because I don't want to do car crash TV. It's a perfect vehicle to set people up to fail. And he said, no, we went out for a very boozy lunch. I really got on with the guy, a bit unconventional. But he said, no, he convinced me that he wanted to do a program that really extolled the virtues of ceramics, the craft, the clay, and dare I say, the journey of said potters on the program. And lo and behold, I think that's what we kind of have created. it's very uplifting. You know, even when the potters get something wrong, it's not like they're out on their ear. It all depends on what they've done, and we really like to try and emulate and get over that connection that they have with the clay and what they've learned throughout the whole process. Yeah. And it's a great, yeah, it works really, really well. Yeah.
No, I think it's lovely because the way that you, as you say, the way that the contestants, you know, they are contestants, the way that they are treated as well. It's done in a really lovely way. That it's almost like they're brought on. They're never, as you say, there's no humiliation. It's no about, you know, there's never a feeling that, you know, they go away and they've been crushed. You know, they've gone away. They've been actually probably done something they probably couldn't do before, could do now. And they obviously need to work at it more in the future. But it's like a beginning of, it's showing people what you can, and also how you can improve, you know, through the series. I mean, amazing transformations.
And what program? Here I go on my soapbox about Great Pottery Throwdown. But seriously, what program do you follow a process where the actual participants genuinely and visually change and improve throughout a particular program? It's quite rare. I mean, you know, Bake Off, really. You know, anyone can bake a cake. but seriously,
find the hand that feeds there.
That's not quite literally. Yeah. But seriously, no, with the pottery, we do get that progression of potters, obviously, if they survive throughout the weeks. And Sue will know this. You know, we do genuinely see an improvement and sometimes even a different way and experience, a way they experience their skill themselves, their pottery. And I find that inspiring. And to be at close quarters with it, when we're filming it's just brilliant. It's magic.
Yeah. And I love think you're bringing in some of the more industrial processes, you know, that Sue may be more involved with in terms of, there was some ladies that came in from Stoke, you know, putting on those paper transfers, making it look like crazy easy when, you know, it's not easy at all. And also showing that technique quickly and asking people to go and make that, and showing it gives that the whole history and the sort of, you know, and a whole skill that people don't realize how difficult it is to do, and then showing on the program. I loved all those elements, and even making a toilet, you know, that's absolutely bonkers, you know.
Yeah, no, that is bonkers. But even when Sue did the last series, you know, we showed slip casting. It's the first time we'd ever done the slip casting challenge.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, there I am jokingly saying, well, you just pour the stuff in and then pour it out, don't you? It's a bloody mold. Anyone can do that. And lo and behold, actually, it was a perfect example of the potter, the participant, really having to understand not just the physical process, but the actual material and the clay itself. Because if you don't, lo and behold, as we saw, you do get some wonderful mistakes. And you know, that was a perfect example for me in that particular series of, yeah, it looks simple, but it ain't simple. And the simplest disciplines within craft, as your viewers will know this, because obviously some of them do it, but it takes time, and it takes experience, and it takes that level of courage to fail, to then go on and achieve something. Yeah.
So, I mean, we've talked about the career with the pottery throwdown, and you've actually managed to do a third series even during lockdown. So is that coming out sort of in the new year? Or?
Yeah. So we when I got the call, I must admit I was quite surprised. But I can't say enough, you know, to Love Productions, the way the whole thing was organised. I mean, the cast, the potters, the crew, the production team, everyone had to isolate for the whole duration of the filming. We were all tested every 3 days. God knows how much. Well, I know how much it cost. It cost basically about an extra $250,000 to film this forthcoming series because of the COVID regulations. I mean, Love Productions basically wrote the book on how to film under COVID restrictions. The Potters, they had a wonderful time. They were held up in this luxury hunting lodge just outside Stoke. They had their own chef, they had their own studio because they weren't allowed to go home, and they had to reside in this paradise. We used to call it paradise. They had to reside in this place for the whole duration of the 2 months that 11 weeks in the end that we were filming, and it was incredible. And everyone had to wear masks if they weren't in front of the camera when we were on set, and it was incredible. It was a major feat of engineering, I must say.
So is that coming out in the new year? So
between you and I think the unofficial date is that it's going to be the first Sunday of January, Sunday night, and it's going to be on for longer as well. We're the first 3 eps are on for about 1.5 hours, partly because we've got obviously more Potters at the beginning of the stage, and also they wanted to show more of the process and more of the Potters really, and what we're doing. Yeah.
Because I think we have got them to see that.
We've got them doing some crazy stuff again, obviously. Yeah.
So we've talked about your early life, and we've talked about you're starting out as a Potter and then becoming, and you've talked a bit about being in a band. You were quite involved in the music industry at one point, weren't you?
Well, yeah, kind of, yeah.
And then with all that, and how that came to become the Potty Throwdown is an extraordinary story, though, isn't it? I do love that.
It's the universe. It's the universe. Yeah. It is quite strange, and I remember, when it was first announced that I was doing the Pottery Throwdown, because I'd been a maker and a bit of a hermit, to be honest, in my studio, making literally thousands of pots for the retail industry. People used to say, "Who the bloody hell's he?" And never heard of him. Oh, he must be some kind of businessman, and although I do wear that hat sometimes, occasionally, no, my main love and my main focus and where my soul is definitely on the craft potter side. Absolutely. And it's just shone a light on the different sort of facets that you need to have as a craftsperson, to be honest. Yeah.
So, I want to ask you, how does making make you feel?
It's fantastic. Seriously, it is wonderful. And Marge will be a testament to this, but she will tell you that if I'm not touching a piece of clay every 2 or 3 days, I do get a bit funny. I do get a bit agitated. And if I'm not working downstairs in the studio for any given length of time, it's an itch that I have. It has to be scratched. And the minute I set about on that wheel, for me, you do have a sense of calm and a sense of mindfulness that you literally can't experience anywhere else, and it's wonderful. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you as well, do you think craft is valued?
I do think craft, and this is the exciting thing for events like yours and organizations like yours and the people that are watching here. Craft is definitely the new black. It really is. It's definitely coming back to the fore, partly because of programs like the Throwdown. I mean, when we first did the first series of the Throwdown, I had potters coming up to me, when I do various events, saying, you know what, we used to have members of the public into the studio, of a weekend, we'd open it up, and they'd pick up a mug or whatever, and they'd go, "God, 25 quid for a mug? I'm not paying that." Since the program came out, people would come into the studio, they'd pick up buy 2 mugs, and not even think about it, because it's that whether it's conscious or subconscious psyche of seeing craft more prevalent in the media, or seeing people or events like yourselves doing and extolling the virtues of craft. It's tapping into people's imagination and people's acceptance of that's what we do. We basically are a species that make things. Mm-hmm. That's what we do.
Well, when we do the festivals, we always have lots of people demonstrating, lessons and learning. And that's all part of the process to help people understand, why, the value of the work. because as you say, people go, I'm not paying that for that. You know, that the
Yeah,
general, you do hear these. I mean, it's when we do shows that people who come to our shows, they understand that side of things, and the more that we can help people understand the value of it, the better. And people, you know, I know people that come to the craft festival and they may not buy craft or consume craft in any other way, particularly because we've created a very friendly and open opportunity to enjoy it. And they
yeah,
might come each year and buy a mug, you know, and some might come each year and buy a set of furniture. I mean, there's everyone in between. You know, I want it to be something that is for everyone. You know, and I think that's what we need to get across. That craft isn't a rarefied. It is a rarefied skill. Obviously, you have to learn it and be part of it.
yeah.
But it's a beautiful thing to be part of, and you can consume it in a really easy way.
Look, I mean, you know, let's face it, and maybe this is a bit of a crass statement to say, but let's face it, back in the early 70s and you know, even maybe even the early 80s, you know, craft people used to think of, you know, pipe smoking, bearded, you know, sort of sandal wearing craftspeople, and that might just be the women as well. So it's you know, it was really nuts and grass, and I have that kind of thing about you know, craft. You know, you know, there's definitely a place for it and there's an area for it, but people's perception generally, that's what they used to think of craft. They used to think of some hermit working in a cave, bashing out stuff with either wood, clay, or glass or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's because, and it's a testament to the craftspeople that we have today, that there is some wonderful, creative, contemporary design going on within craft. And I would go further to say that craft is a much stronger movement than any other kind of discipline at the moment. And people are really tapping into that. Craft doesn't have to be just about, you know, the earthy nuts and grass, the browns and the dark greens of this world. It's very contemporary. It's very forward thinking, and ever more so that ironic sort of nature of it, because we're all working with natural products, from natural materials from the earth, and it's fantastic what you can do with it, and that's now beginning to seep into the mainstream. It takes a while, but it's beginning to seep into the mainstream, and because of the all and sundry here, because of what they produce and what they design and that contemporary feel that they put on stuff, it's amazing. It's absolutely brilliant, that aesthetic.
Well, you've been going back to your sort of your studio pottery roots recently, and I've got a few questions here about, you know, people, what inspires your own personal practice that you've been doing recently.
Well, yeah, so in a word, everything inspires me, and I think partly because I do have dyslexia. You tend to look at the world in a kind of different way, and I literally do see. I'll tell you a funny story. I do this thing, and Sue will know this. And it could be liable. It could be liable. But I do this thing where when I'm on set, Marge's now saying careful. No, it's fine. But I tend to go around and I massage people's shoulders because it's a bit like kneading clay. So when I'm judging, and it's like, and I can't get hold of a piece of clay, I get up behind people and I start massaging them and this, that, the other. And I love it because it does feel like you're kneading clay. And I quite often will see a shoulder, or I'll see a kneecap as a cereal bowl. Oh, that's a lump of clay that you choose to make a cereal bowl. And it's that kind of observation of not just humans, but of the general world, that you get inspiration from everything. Color. I mean, fortunately for me, I live by the sea, and it's fantastic. And you just get inspiration from everywhere. And as long as you keep your eyes wide open, you can come up and create some amazing things.
Well, Keith, I've loved talking to you. I think that's a good point to thank you. And well, I'll just check, has anyone got any more questions for Keith? Because there was quite a few questions in the chat. But it's lovely to talk to you, Keith. Again, it's always a great opportunity to learn from you. And all amazed by the background and how things have worked for you. But one thing is you work extremely hard. You're extremely passionate about what you do. And I just think it comes across in spades, really. So thank you so much, Keith. I thank you from everyone, everyone that's here. You know, if we give him give Keith a little wave, say thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming.
Right.
And if you have any questions, then I think everyone's just saying thank you very much. So
Great.
Keith,
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
For joining us. Thanks.
Yeah. Take care and good luck with the digital craft fair.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Good luck with it all.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye, love. Bye.